Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. Simone here. Today I'm going to be doing the Shakespeare tag because I was tagged by the wonderful Laura from What Everyone Else Is Reading. I will link her channel and video down below. I just want to say how much I love Laura. I think she's the sweetest, kindest, most supportive person I've had the pleasure of meeting online, and I love Laura, honestly. If you're not following her or subscribing to her already, definitely do. Also follow her on Twitter because she's one of the smartest people I've met as well. I adore her in lots of ways. I adore her for so many reasons, and you definitely need to subscribe to her. So a massive thank you to Laura for tagging me in this because I find this to be a really interesting video. But let's get started with the questions. So question one is Much Ado About Nothing. Your favourite bickering couple who everyone knows really care about each other, and that can be a romantic relationship or it can be a like friendship. For this one I have picked Jason Clary from the Mortal Instrument series. I find it really funny. I would say it's more the beginning of the series rather than this one, which is the one I have, but I only own this one now, so I obviously have to talk about this one. I think that, yeah, in the first book specifically, Jason Clary do a lot of bickering and a lot of kind of back and forth, and I think it probably goes as well with Clary and Simon, who is Clary's best friend. I think that there's just the kind of bickering sort of side to Clary in general, so I think that perhaps that's where it comes from, but I do find it to be really funny, and like I just love both Clary and Jace, to be honest with you, and I think their relationship is adorable. So personally I think they are a bickering couple who you can tell have so much love for each other and are like obsessed with each other actually in some times. So yeah, definitely one that I think is the bickering couple that everyone knows loves each other. Question number two is Measure for Measure. A book whose plot or genre is really hard to explain to other people. For this one I'm definitely going to go for The Dead Zone by Stephen King. I will try and explain partly, but again it's so difficult to explain. Most Stephen King books tend to have so much like depth to them that it's really hard to explain exactly the story. So this follows a man who has an accident, a car accident, who ends up, I'm not going to try and explain this one because like I said it's a very difficult book to explain. I personally really liked this Stephen King book. I think I gave it a 4-star. I thought it was a really fun one and it had a lot of interesting things in it. The only thing I didn't particularly love about it was that it had quite a lot of political, like American politics in it, which wasn't like my favourite thing, but yeah, definitely a great read. There are some wonderful scenes in it, and yeah, it's just one of those books that I don't think I can explain to you ever. Question number three is A Midsummer's Night Dream, and that's one of my favourite Shakespeare plays. And this is your favourite book featuring fairies or elves. Now I'm going to be completely unoriginal here and say The Hobbit by J.R.R. Tolkien. Personally I'm not the biggest fan of the Lord of the Rings books just because I find them to be a little bit too much, but I think The Hobbit, as far as I'm aware, it was tended to be for like a younger audience, and I think maybe that's why I can understand it a lot more, because it is still quite flowery language and quite like over the top language, I guess you'd say, but I personally really loved it. I also really like the films of The Hobbit and The Lord of the Rings, so you know, I can go with that. If you don't know, basically this follows Bilbo Baggins, who is a hobbit that's living in the Shire, and he gets taken on a adventure with a bunch of dwarfs who are trying to take their castle back after Smaug the dragon stole it and is essentially trying to keep all their gold to himself. This has elves in it, it has fairies in it, it has all sorts of things in it, and yeah, it's a really great sort of high fantasy series. It's a really great high fantasy book, and definitely one that I think that you should read, especially if you tried the Lord of the Rings and you didn't love it. This one is a great book to give a go. Question number four is Hamlet, and that is definitely my favourite Shakespeare play. I personally adore Hamlet. And this one is an underutilized female character. Now I personally am going to go for another Stephen King book, and that one is going to be It by Stephen King. If you don't know, obviously it's about the clown, but that's not the part I'm referring to. The actual story of it follows 6 friends who essentially live in Derry, Maine. Nothing surprising there because Stephen King loves Maine, and they all deal with it basically, and then when they're older they kind of all get sucked back to the place that they lived because it has returned essentially, and one of the 6 main characters is a girl named Beverly, and I love Beverly's character, but I do think that she's often not there as a plot device, or not there because she, you know, as a token female, but I think that there could have been more in it rather than what ended up happening. I won't spoil it, but I do think that she's underutilised because I think she's a great character personally. Question number 5 is the Sonnets, and this is to choose your favourite poem. As a child, my favourite poem, like my favourite author, were 2 different ones. One was Alan Allberg and one was Michael Rosen. I had 2 particular poems that I adored. Alan Allberg, I loved his Please Mrs. Butler. That is literally stuck in my head. I will never forget that poem. And if I could find Alan Allberg's poems, especially if I found it in a charity shop, that would be amazing, because I love Dear Mrs. Butler or Please Mrs. Butler. Please Mrs. Butler, this boy Derek Drew keeps copying my homework. Whatever shall I do? I absolutely loved it. I remember doing a like a recital of the poem with some of my friends at school on like it's at school. I can't even remember what it was for or why we did it, but I absolutely loved it. I think it was for like show and tell time. But yeah, I absolutely love that. And my favourite Michael Rosen poem is the poem Chocolate Cake. I'll put a link to it if I can find it, because I'm sure it's online somewhere. I will try and link that poem down below because you definitely should read it. It's literally the best thing I've ever read. I love Michael Rosen, and I used to have a copy of his poems too, and I would absolutely love a book of those poems again because both of those are amazing. Question number 6 is Richard III, a protagonist willing to do anything to get what they want. And for me, it has to be Joshua Cain from 13 by Steve Kavanagh. Joshua Cain is actually a serial killer who has managed to get himself on the jury of a murder trial, and honestly, if this is not the definition of someone who will do whatever to get what they want, I don't know what is, because I think this was amazing. And Joshua Cain is the most ruthless individual, and yeah, 100%, if you read this, you'll know exactly what I'm talking about. Question number 7 is Antony and Cleopatra. Your favourite trope or bookish buzzword, historical figure, etc., for which you still haven't found that perfect book. So I have one for this, but I do have some favourites of that genre, but I would love to find more. I don't find very many that I absolutely love of this genre, and that is the courtroom legal thriller style. I have mentioned in my wrap-up that I did on Monday that I had 2 like amazing courtroom thrillers, and I just want more, basically. I mean, I have found great ones, but I will never stop wanting more of them. Question number 8 is Titus Andronicus, and this is a lesser known work by a popular author, one which you want more people to read, and for this one it definitely has to be The Scorpio Races by Maggie Stiefvater. I hear people talking about Maggie Stiefvater all the time, but they're always talking about the Raven Boys and the Raven Cycle, but I think The Scorpio Races is actually the only book of hers that I've read, and I absolutely loved it. It basically follows an island where these horses, like wild horses essentially, come up at a certain time of the year, and there's a Scorpio race, so basically all of the men sign up to race these horses, and it's kind of potentially going to kill them because these horses are like wild. There's a young girl who actually signs up to be part of this race because she's trying to save her family, because she needs the money basically to stay on the island with her brothers because her parents both died. And yeah, it's a great story, and I just wish more people read it, and I mean, I haven't read The Raven Cycle myself yet. I need to do that. I do have the first book, so I can't obviously say how it compares because I haven't read both of them, but The Scorpio Race is definitely a great book, and I would love more people to read it. Next we have question 9, and that is King Lear, and this is a complex female villain or anti-hero. I went with an anti-hero that I personally love, and that is Lisbeth Salander from The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo and the Millennium series by Stieg Larsson. I think Lisbeth is definitely an anti-hero. I got a bit confused completely what an anti-hero was. When I looked it up, it said it's like the hero of the story who's not really, doesn't have the hero kind of tropes, I guess, and I think Lisbeth definitely fits into that. She doesn't have your stereotypical kind of wants to save everyone and, you know, does things in a certain way. She's very much antisocial. She is her own person, like she's not going to change for anyone, and I personally really love that about her. So yeah, I definitely think she's an anti-hero and I love her. Question number 10 is The Taming of the Shrew, and this is to choose 2 polarising books, one you loved and one you hated, and I decided to pick 2 books by an author that I personally quite enjoy. However, I hated one book and loved the other. I hated Sharp Objects by Gillian Flynn, but I adored Dark Places, and then Gone Girl for me was kind of in the middle. So yeah, I would love to know actually what your opinions are on Gillian Flynn's books. If you've read more than one of them, what you thought, or if you haven't, if you've only read one, what did you think of that one? Because I find it really interesting. I often hear people say they love sharp objects but hate dark places, whereas I'm completely the opposite way around. So yeah, let me know in the comments down below what you think of that. Question number 11 is give me your hands if we be friends, and this is to tag some people. So for me, when I think of Shakespeare and when I think of like classics and when I think of literature and plays and love, I always think of Ashley from A Frolic Through Fiction, so I would love to tag her. I also want to tag Moose from the channel Aramoose, and I'd love to tag Clint from Reed's Readers. So I hope that you three love this tag and want to do it yourself. If you don't, that's absolutely fine, but I think that you'll have some great answers to these questions. And then finally, I want to do my video shout out for this video, and it's going to be to Shay. Shay is a booktuber. He's a guide booktuber, which is few and far between. I think we need many, many more. And he has so much fun. And I also really love that he does these like read-along discussions where he reads like certain books and like discusses them as he goes. I personally think that's amazing. I love Jay's channel, and you should all go and check him out because he's fantastic. So give this video a thumbs up if you enjoyed it, guys, and subscribe to my channel if you haven't already, and I will see you next time for another video. Bye!